Hello, welcome back to my channel, Thriving, Not Just Surviving. I'm your host, Jolie Henry. If you're new here, I talk about everything related to wellness on this channel: health, nutrition, fitness. I have a special emphasis on longevity and anti-aging. And today, I'm asking the question, what diet does science say is the best for you to live a long and healthy life? And I think it's really important here that we differentiate between just living a long life and living a long, healthy life. Because really, who wants to get to the age of 80 and then spend another 20 years barely hanging on, suffering through conditions such as dementia, diabetes, heart diseases? We want to live long, healthy lives so that we can contribute towards society, continue ticking off those things on our bucket list, and spend more time with our friends and with our loved ones. That's what we all want. I'm really delighted today to talk about the longevity diet. It's a book that I recently read, and it was written by Dr. Valter Longo. Now, Dr. Longo is an Italian longevity researcher, and he spent decades of his life going around the world visiting some of the longest living communities in the world. He visited Okinawa in Japan. He visited many communities in Italy which have lots of people who've lived over the age of 80, sometimes into their 90s and even their early hundreds. He visited the area of Loma Lima in California, which has a specific religious community which has a lot of long living humans there. And he talked to all these people who lived long lives and asked them about what their lifestyle was like. He asked them about specifically what kind of diet they followed, and also their habits. How much did they exercise? How much did they rest? How much stress did they encounter? All that kind of stuff. And he compiled all this information together with lots of other research he did in his lab and lots of other studies that other people have done. And he came up with the longevity diet, which is the diet which science believes is the best for helping us to live not just long lives, but long, healthy lives. So I want to dive a bit further into that today and talk about the main points of the diet and how you can incorporate it into your own lifestyle. The first point on the diet is eating a diet which is mainly plant-based and limiting animal protein to fish, which you only eat no more than 2 or 3 times a week. Now, he didn't come across any people who were either vegetarians or vegans of these long-lived people, but they were mostly vegan. So they ate dairy seldom, if ever, and they ate meat very seldom. An example might be they would eat meat just at a friend's wedding every other month or something like that. But plenty of these communities did eat fish and shellfish, perhaps 2 or 3 times a week. But the bulk of their protein, the majority of their protein, plant-based. So when we're talking about plant-based proteins, we're looking at things like tofu, lentils, chickpeas, or I think in the States you call them garbanzo beans. What else? Nuts, hemp seeds, all these great high fiber proteins which come from plants. You can probably get away with eating meat once a week if you really love it and you really can't live without it. Or like me, for example, I am naturally low in iron, so it really is healthy for me to eat red meat at least once a week. However, if you do eat meat once a week, it's going to be harder for you to fulfill the next requirements of the diet, which is consuming between 0.31 to 0.36 grams of protein per pound of body weight per day. So for me, for example, I weigh 64 kgs, that's 140 pounds. I am able to eat between 45 grams to 50 grams of protein per day. Now that might sound like a really low amount, and it certainly is if you eat animal protein. For example, a 200 gram steak is already an entire 50 grams. That's your entire protein portion for the entire day, just in one meal. If you eat plant protein, and I'm going to give you an example of a day worth of eating where you can fulfill, sticking within your 50 grams, it's much lower, and I'm going to show you that now. This simple lunch of lentil and potato dal with shredded greens with olive oil and lemon dressing and some sourdough bread on the side comes in at 18 grams of protein.
And this simple dinner of Mexican black beans with 3-color rice, salad and avocado wrapped up in a tortilla comes in at 25 grams of protein. So you can see from these two meals how easy it is to stick within 50 grams of protein a day if you follow a plant-based diet.
If you do want to eat steak once a week, my advice would be to stick to a minute steak, which weighs no more than 100 grams. A 100-gram steak is only 25 grams of protein, so that makes it easier for you to then keep within that requirement. If you're somebody who's roughly my size, obviously if you're a tall, big man, then you'll be able to eat more, and you can do your own calculation in terms of how much protein you should be eating per day. The next requirement is to maximise good fats and complex carbohydrates. Now here, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around what complex carbohydrates are, because I hear people talking about bread, potatoes, pasta, rice as being complex carbohydrates. And yes, they are, but if you're sticking to white bread, white rice, white pasta, plain white potatoes with the skins taken off, you are really having carbohydrates which turn very easily into starch and into sugar in the body. What you want to be doing is picking brown pasta, brown rice, for example, the older grains like rye, spelt, teff flour, and things like sweet potatoes, things like, the wild rice and the quinoa and yams, that kind of thing. So you really want to be steering away from the white breads and the white pastas and the simple carbohydrates and steering more towards the high fiber wholemeal carbohydrates. That is what all of these long-lived people around the world have typically eaten. And all of these long-lived humans around the world ate loads of veggies. So they weren't just getting the bulk of their protein from vegetables, they were also eating lots and lots of vegetables on the side. That is something that is extremely common in all of the groups of long-lived humans that he talked to. Moving on to the good fats. When we look at good fats, we're thinking things like avocados, almonds, your nut butters, your peanut butters and your almond butters and your walnuts, the seeds, things like flax seeds, hemp seeds. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about good fats. The fats that come from natural sources, either seeds or nuts or avocados, those kind of fats, and then the carbohydrates that are high fiber and low glycemic index. Obviously, this will come as no surprise. You want to be minimizing bad fats and sugars. So there's obvious sugars on the list, things like donuts, chocolates, cake, but also the other things I mentioned which are less obvious: white bread, white bagels, basically all of your white carbohydrates which convert really easily into simple sugars in your bloodstream and are not at all good for you. I really like what Dr. Longo has done with this diet plan. He doesn't say you should never have it because he knows that's unrealistic. People want to have these salty, sugar and high fat foods now and again. You want to go to a friend's wedding and be able to enjoy a piece of their wedding cake. You want to be able to commiserate with a friend who just lost a job and have a beer together, for example. So I think he understands, and I understand as well, that food isn't just about nourishing us, it's also what binds us together as humans and provides us with that shared human experience. And it's cultural as well as nutritious. So, he's not saying never ever eat those things, he's just saying eat them minimally. Now, minimal might mean different things to different people. For me personally, I kind of tend to limit it towards the weekends. Like I might have a glass of wine on a Friday night, then maybe something sweet on a Saturday lunchtime, and then maybe I'll have a packet of crisps on a Sunday or something. So, for me that works well for me because I do quite a lot of exercise, and during the week I keep my diet really, really healthy. But you have to kind of find your own limits in terms of what works for your body, what you're comfortable with, what you're willing to give up for your health and well-being. When we're talking about bad fats, we're really thinking trans fats, so anything that has fat which also has a long shelf life. So, the kind of packaged donuts, for example, which have got a long shelf life. The reason why they've got a long shelf life is because they're full of trans fats. Those are really, really bad for your body. Also things like hot dogs, these packaged processed meats, highly processed foods, they have tons of not just bad fats but also lots of preservatives and other junky things that are really, really bad for you. So you want to be keeping those kinds of foods to a minimum. You need to be keeping your alcohol consumption to a minimum as well. The next one is really interesting. Eat a variety of foods from your grandparents' cultural heritage. Now, what he means here is, for example, my dad is South African. One of the foods that is from my cultural heritage is rooibos tea. And interestingly, one day when I went to see a nutritionist, she found that I was deficient in magnesium, and rooibos tea is high in magnesium. So often you'll find that the foods that our grandparents traditionally ate are the ones which we've evolved with over time through a lineage of, generations of different genetics, and those are the foods that our bodies really need. So for example, if you're a Japanese person, you might do really well with natto. That's one of their traditional fermented bean foods that they eat for breakfast. If you are German, including sauerkraut in your diet. If you are Korean, you might be including kimchi. Next, he talked about eating twice a day plus a snack and not skipping breakfast. Skipping either lunch or dinner and replacing one of the meals that you skip with a snack which is less than 100 calories. Now, obviously, I have really big mixed feelings about what he said about skipping breakfast. He said that there's a lot of studies around the world that have linked skipping breakfast specifically to developing heart conditions in later life. I've really struggled with this because I've talked before on a previous video about the fact that I'm a really keen intermittent faster, and I've had such good results with intermittent fasting. It's eradicated my cellulite, it's eradicated my belly fat, and I just feel fantastic skipping breakfast. So I think I'm gonna go away and give this a little bit more thought and think about whether I want to include it, because I have heard conflicting reports as well. Some researchers say it's the best thing ever for you, so I think maybe the science is still a little bit divided where that is concerned. I think what he's talking about though with only having 2 meals is the more meals you have in a day, the more opportunities you have to overeat, basically. So if you limit your meals to less, then it means that the chances of you overeating is less. And that was one thing that was common in all of these long-lived humans around the world that he talked to, is that they had small meals and they didn't overeat. Another thing that they all tended to do was eat their meals within a 12-hour window. So for example, if they had breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, then they would make sure they had their dinner before 8 o'clock in the evening. So eat within a 12-hour window. And typically they weren't eating within 3 to 4 hours of going to bed. So they would have early dinners to make sure their body has finished digesting before they go to bed. And the last thing that he talked about was people who are under 65 doing what he called a fasting mimicking diet for 5 days, 2 times per year. Now, again, I have a little bit of conflicting feelings about this one, because the fasting mimicking diet is basically a special diet plan which tricks the body into thinking that you're fasting. So it puts the body in a fasting state, even though you are still eating food. And this fasting mimicking diet is something that you have to buy specifically from his website, from a company that he's kind of invested in and he gains from financially. So obviously there is a financial incentive for him. It's not that I'm against anybody making money, of course, and if it's for a good reason, you're trying to help people's health to live healthy lifestyles, which is what he's doing here, then why not? The science is clear that if everybody was to fast for 5 days, do like a water fast for 5 days twice a year, anyone who's healthy, that is, that would be a really, really good thing for your body. What Dr. Longo is trying to introduce with a fasting mimicking diet is it introduces it to people who otherwise would not do that fast, because fasting for 5 days, just doing a pure 5-day water fast, is incredibly difficult. It takes a lot of willpower, a lot of discipline, and people's lives these days, how busy people's lives are, a lot of people just don't have it within them, either because of their schedule or just because, they don't have the willpower and they don't have the drive to do it. So he is looking at a way of bringing that fasting state to people, but in a way that isn't so daunting and is perhaps more palatable to the average person, and that's where the fasting mimicking diet comes in. For myself personally, I think I would rather just do a 5-day fast, and well, I say that now, I've never done one, so let's just see how I get on with it when I do it. But doing a 5-day water fast doesn't cost you anything, so it only costs you discipline. So I think I'm going to try that and see how I get on with it. Maybe I will fail miserably and then I'll come back on a future video and tell you, no, let's just do the fasting mimicking diet. But I'm just telling you what was in the book. He recommends the fasting mimicking diet, and also I think there are certain people who for health reasons cannot fast at all, and the fasting mimicking diet is a little bit safer. So that's it, that's the longevity diet in a nutshell. I'd love to know what you think in your comments below. I know that diets are a controversial area. I think I've heard people say, you know, they swear by the keto diet, other people they swear by the carnivore diet, other people swear by the vegan diet. I would love to know what you think. What I really like about this diet, as I said, is that I think it is an incredibly easy diet for anybody to follow. The requirements aren't too complicated, and it's a diet which is actually enjoyable. You know, it should be easy to make delicious, nutritious, plant-based foods with lots of vegetables and a variety of different colours. And, you know, I think that's what Dr. Longo was trying to do here. He was trying to make a diet which is possible for you to follow for the rest of your life, because one of the biggest reasons why diets fail is just that people do not stay on them. So if you make a diet that is so strict and so difficult for people to stay on, they just won't stay on it. So what I really like here is there's lots of room for flexibility, lots of room for tailoring it around your likes and dislikes, and I think it is genuinely a diet that you could follow for the rest of your life. The one thing that I haven't tried yet, which I'm kind of excited to try in a future video, is the fasting idea, the idea of fasting for 5 days twice a year. So watch this space. If you're interested in that, then please subscribe below and hit like and share with as many of your friends as you can. And then you can see how I get it on further on down the line later on in the year when I do my 5-day fast. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.